Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much to Jamie and Jack always for opening up their home. Today's class is Leilun Nishmat Abraham ben Latife and Edmond ben Frida. And for the Fu'ah Shelema, for anybody who may need it, feel free to insert any name you feel could use the zechut of the Torah that we're going to share. Haya Sarah Bet Simcha
Nisim ben Penina.
and Nisim ben Penina.
Uri ben Flora.
Uri ben
Flora.
Flora. Okay. So has anybody here ever taken a lie detector test? Yeah, that's we'll count that as a good thing. Okay, that's a good thing. Does anybody know how a lie detector test works? How does it work?
The heart rate goes up. That's when they think you're lying.
Okay, good. So one thing that it monitors is heart rate, because when a person starts to lie, naturally they start to get like a little bit of an adrenaline flow. They realize there's a natural feeling of I'm doing something wrong. So it becomes, the rush that a person gets when they're going against the rules, right? Starts to elevate their heart rate, and they start to feel that. As a result of elevated heart rate, what does your body start to do? Sweat. Good. You start to sweat a lot more. In particular, the fingers, the balls of your fingers start to really produce a lot of moisture. Those are very sensitive areas, which is why if you ever look at a person taking a lie detector test, they wrap around the tips of their fingers to monitor the level of sweat that's coming out. And that is also showing that certain components are going into the blood. I think it's sodium that starts to pick up. A person starts to sweat a little bit, and it measures the electricity inside of the person's body that starts to flow. Their hair might start to raise up. They might start to get a little bit of goosebumps, and all of the different elements of the lie detector test start to pick up on these very, very sensitive changes that are going on inside of the person's body. Scientists have found that the response to lying is very similar to a response that people have when they have a lot of pain, right? So a lot of things something that people try to do to beat the lie detector test is they try to like clench a little bit, or they try to tighten. And that's why they started putting things underneath them when they sit on them to detect any type of shifting or changing in their posture. Other things that happen when people lie is their voice starts to maybe change a little bit. Their eyes might widen, their facial expressions might change. So I always wondered as a kid, how is it that my mom was so good at figuring out that I'm lying? Like, I don't know, maybe I felt like mothers have like this sixth sense that they just know when their children are not telling the truth. Anybody feel like they have that? You can pick up in 2 seconds when your kid's like lying. They start looking up at the sky. They can't look at you in the eye. They start to fidget around. They're playing with things. There's a lot of obvious things, especially when people are not good liars when they're children. You can pick up on it in 2 minutes. People get better at it when they get to be adults, but even still, we can sort of pick up on it. What all of that tells us is that Hashem created our bodies, and in a way where lying is counter to our nature, right? It goes against the natural instincts of our body. And when we do it, we experience these big changes that are going on, because our bodies are basically trying to signal to us that what we're doing is throwing the body mentally and physically and emotionally off by not telling the truth. So you almost pick up on this natural hardwired nature that we have towards telling the truth. Yet for some reason, all of us have this propensity to bend the truth and to lie, and we develop it as we go through life, where sometimes we think that not being forthcoming and fully truthful is the easiest way to go, maybe the least painful. But I think we find out very quickly that that's not always the case. Health advisors have found, people have studied this a lot, they find that being truthful, the more a person tells the truth, the healthier their body actually is. They have lower levels of stress, of anxiety, they sleep better, fewer headaches and sore throats. And not all of that might be because their relationships improve. When people know that you tell the truth, even if it sometimes hurts to tell the truth, it might get a person in trouble, it might be something that is not desirable to tell. People always appreciate, in the end of the day, someone who they feel that is honest with them, someone who has integrity. They'll always come back to that person in the end of the day, as opposed to somebody who pleases them, but they kind of know that they're not being very honest and forthcoming. We are hardwired to want to spend time and be in deep, meaningful relationships with people who we could trust and people who we feel are honest with us. And so that's why our best relationships, our closest relationships, are with our spouses, our children, our parents, And these are the people that we feel we can be most like ourselves and not be judged and not be looked down upon and feel like we have unconditional love despite whatever faults we might actually present. So essentially, the more a person needs to be dishonest around certain people, the less of an intimate relationship they're going to have. It means you can't be vulnerable with that person. You can't be your true self, which means that that relationship is probably very shallow. It's not a deep relationship. Our spouses, our children, we can be ourselves, we don't have to wear makeup around them. We don't have to dress our best, and they still love us for who we are. That says a lot about the type of relationship that we have with those people. So I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about truth and mostly about talking about being ourselves, and that sometimes pretending to be somebody that we're not, or being somebody who we're trying to be to please other people, is actually one of the most damaging forms of lying that we can, mostly because we're lying to ourselves. But first, I want to start with just the Torah's perspective on the importance of truth. There are no shortage of pisukim, of verses in the Torah and in the Navi that talk about the virtue that is honesty and truth. The pasuk in Shemot says, "Midevar sheker tirhak." Distance yourself from matters of falsehood, whether it's other people who are telling falsehoods, ideas that you believe are false, or you yourself telling things that are false to other people. You want to distance yourself from that as far as you can. Not fulfilling a person's word. When you say that you're going to do something and then following through on what you say you're going to do is a form of truth telling, right? That's why the Torah says be very careful about making a vow or saying that you're going to do something, because if you're not absolutely sure that you're going to do it, in the end, it will appear as though the person did not tell the truth, that you were lying all along about what you were trying to do. So following through on your word is another barometer for truth. The pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 85, says, "Emet me'eretz titzmach." The truth grows up from the ground. V'tzedek, righteousness, mishamayim nishkak, looks down on us from the heavens. I think that means to say that God is looking for us to perform righteousness in this world. He's looking for us to be kind to other people, compassionate to others, to enact the heavenly laws about how to be good with others. But truth ultimately comes from the ground. Truth is determined by human beings. It's determined by us. What is ultimately truth and what we believe in is something that we have to handle between us. And so it's our job to be beacons of truth for other people around us and to tell the truth always towards other people. I'll give you a nice story, a very famous story that was told. I don't know how well this will go over with a group of women, but I hope it will. It's a story in the Gemara, Masechet Yebamot, Daf Samech Gimel Amud Aleph. I'm sure you've heard the story told at one point. There was a rabbi by the name of Rav, whose wife wasn't so nice to him. And every time he would ask for something for dinner, she would make him the opposite. So if he asked for lentils, she would make him noodles. If he asked for noodles, she'd make him lentils. Whatever it was, she would go ahead and ask for, he would ask for something and she would do the opposite. So Rav's son, Rabbi Chia, noticed this. And after a while, he said, "Dad, just ask me and I'll make sure to get you the dinner." And what would Rav do? He would ask for something from Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Chia would tell his mom the opposite, so that she would make the opposite, so it would really fit with what Rav wanted, right? And after a while, Rav started noticing, wow, my wife started making the things that I wanted. I must be doing something right. Something good must be happening. And Rabbi Chia told him, no, she's not doing anything different. She's still making the opposite, except I'm giving her the opposite from you. So when she makes the opposite, it's really what you wanted the whole time. And Rav said, wow, I didn't think of that. How come I didn't think of doing that? He says, but I don't like what you're doing. He says, I don't like what you're doing. Why not? He said, because at the end of the day, you're not being truthful. You're presenting to mommy what not in accordance with what I said. And as a result, you're going to learn the habit of not telling the truth. And so he said, I don't like what you're doing. It might come out well in the end, but it's not a good practice to develop the idea of lying. In other words, if this sounds like something very silly, what this Gemara, I think, is teaching us is something very silly. Okay, it's just casual conversation. What do you want for dinner? How bad could it be? It's not something that we would say is very high stakes. But Rav is telling his son, Rabbi Chia, that if you start, that lying is a habit, lying is a way of life. If a person starts to develop the tendency to not tell the truth, even in low stakes, silly situations that don't mean anything, eventually that will become a way of life. They won't be able to discern the difference. And when things become more important and more is riding on them, they will not be telling the truth in those situations. Because if you can't tell the truth about something as silly as what you want for dinner, then when it comes to what my boss is asking me for, my wife is asking me for, and maybe I might upset somebody because of what I say, you're for sure going to lean on the side of not telling the truth. Because in that moment, you think that's going to get you out of a very unpleasant, uncomfortable type of situation. So we also learn that truth telling is a way of life. It's a habit. It's something that a person has to consciously do and do all the time if a person wants to get used to it. There's no such thing as, oh, it's a little fib. My grandmother used to call it a fib or a white lie. Fib, you've heard this word before? Yeah. There's a fib. Oh, it's a little fib or something like that. It's okay, no big deal. In Judaism says that's a really big problem because those things tend to grow. It was a children's book that I used to read. It was called Ellie's White Lie. Everybody saw it? Yeah. Huh? Is that what it is? I don't know who it was, but it's called Ellie's White Lie. And the thing was, he tells a little lie, and then the white lie, and then it turns into a big thing, right? And it starts to blow up. Or there's the boy who cried wolf and things like that. All these types of fables and stories show us that truthfulness is a way of life. And there are certain people we look around and we go, oh, that's an honest person, because we know that they always tell the truth no matter what. Versus people who we know they fudge things here and there. And even if it's silly, in the back of our minds, I don't trust that person a lot, because if they can lie about something silly, then they're certainly going to lie later on when things become a lot more heavy. So, all of this leads us to understand how important it is for us to be telling the truth all the time, and to model that for our children as well. It's so important for us to constantly tell our children when they try to lie to get out of things, which they all will do at some point, to tell them, I'm not as upset about what you did as much as I'm upset that you didn't tell the truth about it. Something that I tell my daughters all the time. It makes me more upset that you didn't tell the truth, that you couldn't trust me to tell me what happened, that you had to make up a story. It's worse than what you actually did, right? I always want you to feel comfortable to tell me the truth. And as parents, if our children are not telling us the truth, then that should signal to us that there's something that we need to discuss with them about why it is that they saw the need to have to lie to us. Did they think we were going to hit them? Did they think that we were going to, whatever it is? Okay, I didn't want my phone to get taken away. I didn't want this to get taken away. But then you have to explain to them, you just lost something so much more valuable than your car for a week. Yeah, you might have lost your car for a weekend. You might have lost your ability to go out if you would have told me the truth. But by lying to me, you lost something so much more. You lost your integrity. You lost my trust, which that's a much more important thing. You have to explain to children, especially young adults, that their trust is their number one asset that anybody will have for them. If their boss can trust them, if their teachers can trust them, if their administrators can trust them, if their parents and friends can trust them, then they will have a lot of success in their relationships in life, which will lead to success in all areas. If they don't have the trust of the people around them, then they're going to find themselves failing in a lot of scenarios. So we have to do a better job of explaining to our children when they're lying to us or not being fully forthcoming or truthful with us. Why is it that you feel you can't tell me the whole truth? What am I going to do to you that's so bad that you'd rather compromise your truthfulness, your reputation, your integrity in order to get out of an undesirable situation? That's something that we have to try and train and work with our children. The rabbis tell us that Torah scholars are judged by their truthfulness. So there's an interesting halakha that normally if a person loses an object, how do you know who to return it to? How do you know? I found something. How do I find the rightful owner? So someone says they lost it, but I can't just trust anybody who says that they lost it. So there has to be a sign. I have to go and they have to give me this, I have to give me that. The halakha says that if a Torah scholar asks it from you, says, oh, I lost something, you trust them right away. You don't even have to ask them for a sign. You can give it right back to them. It says, how do we know if someone's a Torah scholar? The answer is if they tell the truth. If there's somebody who's known to be 100% honest, they don't lie in any situation, then that's somebody who's considered, and you can give it back to them knowing that they wouldn't tell you that it's theirs or that they lost an object if it wasn't really. They wouldn't try to deceive you. The hallmark of a Torah scholar, the hallmark of a person who is religiously close to Hashem, is somebody who tells the truth. That is the stamp and the seal of Hashem. And so truthfulness is really a major foundational piece towards building a religious lifestyle. And if we can't be trusted, if we're not telling the truth, then there's something really deficient in our relationship with Hashem and in our spiritual growth as a whole. Questions, comments, or things to add to any of what we just said? I know we hit a lot. Yes, Jen.
So I'm just thinking the whole time, so how do we reconcile like that, the famous story that we've all heard as little kids, like when Hashem does that with Sarah and Abraham?
Very good. So there is a unique exception, right? And I think the problem here is that people tend to expand this a little bit too far, right? By the way, it appears in this week's parasha. I wasn't going to bring it up. It also appears in this week's parasha in Vaychi, when the brothers come to Yosef at the end and they say, "Oh, your father told us, Yaakov told us before he died that you should forgive us for what we did," right? Which no conversation ever seemed to have been there. The rabbis say the brothers lied to Yosef in an attempt to try to make peace between the brothers and Yosef. They said to Yosef after Yaakov died, "Oh, Yaakov wanted you to forgive us for what we had done," because they were nervous Yosef would now take revenge against them after Yaakov died. So the rabbis say, how could the brothers do this? They lied. They lied because they tried to preserve peace. And there is an idea here that peace can sometimes trump truthfulness. If we're trying to create shalom bayit between people, right? Aharon was known to do this. Aharon would sometimes fudge the details. He would go over to one person and say, "Oh, the other guy, he really feels so bad about what he did. He really didn't mean it," or something like that, when he never really said that. And he'll do this to try to bring people together so that they'll apologize and that they'll make peace. That's the answer of what God was doing when he changed a little bit of what Sarah had said. Sarah had said, my master Abraham is old. She criticized him. And then when Hashem went to Abraham, she said that she was old. He left out the details that she said that he was old. So there was an omission there that was done, and God is the one who's doing it. So God is showing that sometimes it's okay to subtly change certain things in order to preserve peace, in order to keep shalom bayit. Yes.
Like they're preserving peace, they don't want us to be angry at them.
Now, see, that's not preserving peace, right? So in other words, that's the idea. Most of the time, what they're trying to do is they're just trying to get themselves out of trouble. Right? They don't want to admit what they did wrong, and they're trying to get themselves out of trouble. And they're telling themselves, "Well, my parents are going to be angry at me. There's no shalom, so I'm going to lie to create shalom." That's not.
As adults, I still think it's very like you're either truthful or you're not.
Right.
So I'm saying it's such a hard.
Yeah. So I've had this struggle, and I'm not so sure that I have 100% clarity on it. That piece, I think, gets emphasized too much, in my opinion. Because it's funny that when I had this conversation with a group of senior girls, the first thing they said is, "But aren't you allowed to lie because to make people happy?" Or something like that. Like I said, no, you can't lie to make people happy, right? Like that's all of a sudden it became like we lied to make peace. Now it's to make people happy. Can't you lie to make your parents happy with you? Like, no, I mean, at a certain point, I think these situations are few and far between. Maybe a person will find themselves in a handful of situations like this their entire life, right? And even with that, we could still argue that truth might still be an appropriate way, right? In other words, okay, so we've all been there, our spouse says, "How do I look?" Okay, so what are we supposed to respond to that? Probably in the moment is, "You look great. It's, you look fantastic. It's amazing," right? And if that's not really the case, well, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to. I clearly haven't mastered it. But it's funny. I saw a talk from this woman. Huh? What do you do when? How do I look? Yeah.
Like, "Oh, I see my skirt. Does it look really bad?"
Right. Yeah.
You look horrible. Let's go
Right.
home.
Right. Right. So sometimes in the moment you do need, in order to maybe build someone's confidence, make them feel good, to be kind. Here's the problem. What I think has developed is this weird connection where people who are truthful are not nice. Right. That all of a sudden this idea of a person saying the truth is like a bad thing because you can't be nice if you say the truth. Right? Is that like this has started to be like a little bit of a right? Okay, nobody's saying that you have to go up to every single person and say, "I don't like that shirt on you." You have to always speak everything that's in your mind. Right. Yeah, but isn't that a problem? Isn't that a problem? The only way we become in a society is that we can't be truthful because not being truthful means not being nice to people. Like, when did that happen? I don't even know when that.
You have to say it in a nicer way.
Right.
Like if you want, like your husband, your wife asks you, how do you look? So, I think I like the green shirt better on you. Like,
Right. Right.
So the person doesn't feel bad.
Right. So you have to get good at figuring out how you can not lie, but while at the same time, you don't have to be, like you said, blunt at people and say, nah, it's ugly, you're terrible. You can, exactly.
Fill them up.
Right. But there's been this weird connection where it seems as though people, I just often hear it around that people who tell the truth, they always said what was on their mind, which is a nice way of saying they're a jerk, right? You know what I mean? Like you're starting to hear that as, they talked what was on their mind. They wore their emotions on their sleeves. These are like all code phrases for this person really wasn't so nice. They used to talk to people in a very mean way, but it's not really true. Sometimes you can be honest with somebody and forthcoming with somebody while still being kind. I saw a nice talk. This woman, her name is Christine Carter. She has a talk about, she does something called integrity cleanses, where she only tells the truth. She really, really focuses in an extreme way in telling the truth. And she says, it doesn't mean that you have to be a jerk to everybody. You don't have to be telling people all the time what's on your mind. You can still keep things in. But it's oftentimes, if someone asks you a question like, how do I look? Or am I overweight or something like that? It's an opportunity. What the other person really wants is they want an opportunity for you to listen to them, right? It might be an opportunity to say, well, how do you think you look? Like, do you not feel good in what you're wearing? Do you not like the way you look? Is there something I can help you with, right? You could still be kind to a person without telling them you look fantastic and you're okay. You understand how that could potentially work?
Don't you have to you could start having these conversations?
Yeah, you could.
Like that are just one, like maybe it's not appropriate, but
100%.
somebody and
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. If it's not your place, then for sure.
But if
Right.
somebody do and pulls you up and asks you anything,
Right.
they're asking you because they value their.
They value your opinion. Right. So there has to be a way that you could express that, but at the same time, they value your opinion, but they also don't want to be, shambled. Exactly. Right.
Okay.
It depends. My wife hates when she says, how do I look? And I say, you look great. She's like, no, now tell me the truth. Right. Because she's really looking for an honest opinion. It depends who the person is. Did I use the word fine? No, I didn't use the word fine. I said, you look great. I said, I like what you're wearing. Really tell me. Like it became a weird thing where now she can't ask me how I look anymore because she always knows what I'm going to say. So I'm not an honest opinion. I'm not a good barometer. Thank you for the tip, Jamie. That's very good. That's very good. We should do that a lot more. 100%. Right. But then does it go the other way? Can I also tell her it doesn't go the other way? Does it go the other way? Okay, very good. Right. So that's why I'm trying not to go there. Right. That's gonna put me in a very bad. It's the husband's paradox. You're just in a bad situation. Whatever you want, you can't win. We've dealt with it. It is what it is. We've survived thousands of years.
Suing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I hope I'm not on video. No.
Yeah.
Good. When you can't do anything about it, right, then it's useless. And the truth is that makes sense, but maybe there's an opportunity later to say, by the way, whatever it is. Okay. So, I mean, we've covered that a little bit. I want to try to refocus the conversation a little bit, though. It's okay. It's okay. Because all of this takes part in an interesting conversation, which is there's a lot of different forms of lying, right? There's a lot of forms of dishonesty, right? There's outright just telling of false facts. Then there's sometimes where we can be less forthcoming. We omit things. We don't tell the full truth. We hide or cover up details, right? Just to smoothen things out. Another form of lying could be really exaggeration, right? If you think about it, exaggeration is a form of lying. You're not really telling the truth. Now, most people can figure out when you're exaggerating and you're doing it for an effect, and they can kind of tell. But if a person's always exaggerating, sometimes it's borderline. It's a form of lying. How many people showed up to the class? 50 people came. Look around, not 50 people, right? So I can make myself feel better about that. Exaggerate, but it's also a form of lying. There's distorting. Another form of lying is also pretending, right? Pretending to be something that we aren't, right? So conformity, if you think about it, is a form of dishonesty towards ourselves, right? And this is what I want to talk about a little bit, because I go through this a lot, right? As I don't know how many people here feel the same way I do, or share the same personality as I am, but I'm a people pleaser, right? A big time, right? I will always want to do something to make sure that I looked at positively by other people in their eyes, right? And that often means compromising something that I might believe in, something that might be true for me, in order to make sure that I don't get looked at negatively by other people. And all of us do this in a lot of different ways. As a rabbi, it could be particularly dangerous because sometimes a person asks me a question. I know the answer to that question is no. Woman calls me up, I cook this and that. What do I do, Rabbi? Please tell me I don't have to throw out my stuff, right? So when you add that in, please tell me I don't have to throw out my stuff. I'm sitting like, right? Because if I tell this woman she has to throw out her stuff, I'm never getting a phone call again, right? That's the end of. I've now on the short list of rabbis that we don't call anymore. But the law is the law. I can't really maneuver it. So like, what do? I'm in a really big bind. And for someone who's a people pleaser, this makes me really start to sweat. I get really nervous. Like I have to tell her the truth. I have to tell her what the rule is, and I think she'll appreciate it in the end of the day. But in the moment, she's going to be really, really disappointed. It's going to be a really, really big problem for her. That is oh God, the pit in my stomach when I get that phone call is like nothing else. And I've had to learn over years of answering these types of questions, how to, be strong about it and how to, so I'll say things to women like, this is really hard. I know you love it or something like that, but you're doing the right thing. It's okay. Hashem's going to repay you with another one. And I'll try to smoothen it over so that I don't feel that way. But in the end of the day, I've had to develop the strength to tell the person what it is. Imagine I didn't have that strength. I'd be like, oh, it's okay. You can be lenient here. No, because I wanted them to like me as a rabbi. That could be really, really damaging. And any one of us can put ourselves in that type of a position where people pleasing could be harmful to us. It could be harmful to other people, but we care so much about what other people think of us that we will often not live our truth or be truthful to ourselves in order to make sure that we're living it out for other people. And that is a very damaging way for a person towards themselves. It's a type of dishonesty that I think can really, really harm us and our families. It can make us really, really miserable, really, really upset at the type of lives we're living. Because one thing about people pleasing is it's very subtle, right? You don't always notice it in the moment that you're doing it because of the other person. I gave you a very clear example, but sometimes your spouse asks you to do something and it's not something you really want to do and it's really bothersome to you, but you do it anyway because you want to please them. Okay, that's fine to do that a certain amount of times, but after a while, it could start to really nag at the person, where you feel like you're doing something that is against who you are as a person, where you're being asked or spoken to against who you are as a person. You're not being true to who you are and what you believe in. And all of a sudden, if that starts to build up, it could really, really explode and erupt to a point where it could damage a relationship that might be eventually beyond repair, as opposed to a person being more forthcoming, being more honest, being more open about what they find to be truthful towards themselves, I think is very important. That's okay.
Rabbi Heber once said something that you have to say no to people, and it's okay, because if you don't say no, you could become a rig, and then it causes lashon hara and resentment. A lot of it. That was very life-changing for me.
Absolutely. I mean, if you take it to extreme levels of abuse and things like that, it's because people, they say, oh, I just want my partner to like me. I just want this friend to like me, or it's okay, it'll stop here. And if you don't set firm boundaries and limits, which is part of that, then people will always extend it. It will never end where you think it will end. It'll always end up getting pushed. Whereas if a person says no, in the moment, it's a little undesirable. It's a little uncomfortable. You feel a little tension, but in the long run, the fact that you were truthful to yourself will make you feel better. It'll make the other person feel better because the other person knows they're getting who you really are. I think that's a very important part. Being truthful with other people might hurt a little bit in the moment, but I think long-term, people will think about you and say, I always know where I stand with this person. I always know that I'm getting the true person that is standing in front of me. And that's the person who they want to love. That's the person who they want to be in a relationship with, as opposed to, what happens if people live, they're married 60, 70 years together. They find out the person they were living with is totally a stranger to them, right? That would be terrible, right? And so I think that when we present who we really are and are truthful to ourselves, we make an opportunity for people to really love us for who we are and not a fake type of love that we know is not really existing there.
So, point, I find that even just the unique experience of being a mother, especially to young children and having that shift, I feel like a piece of us almost not, I don't want to say lost, because it's not the right word, but you're so used to doing what's good for the family. And then all of a sudden you wake up and all your kids are in school. You're like, wait, who am I again? You know, and it's being.
So having a little bit for yourself, yeah.
Also giving yourself the opportunity to even know yourself.
Correct. Reflecting on who you are and what is valuable to you. And it doesn't mean here, like, I think it's important. I wrote here in big capital letters. Number one, doesn't mean you can't help people, right? There's a difference between doing things because of what other people think about you and helping other people, doing things for other people. It's very, very different, right? Sometimes we act in a way that's not really who we are, but because we want approval from others, right? We need to fit in, we need to conform, right? I have a conversation with somebody. This is always a funny conversation. What are you doing? Where are you going for the vacation? I'm going to Aruba. But Rabbi, I really don't want to go to Aruba. I really don't want to be there. I hate it there. It's terrible there. I never like it. I never like it. But I got to do what I got to do. So I don't know why people feel the need to say that, right? They say, I didn't say anything. Have a good time. Enjoy. Like, why do I have to get, like, I don't know what that part is, but there's a lot going on in that conversation when I think about it. First of all, they feel the need to say something because they think I'm judging them, right? They think that when they tell me where they're going for vacation, all of a sudden, if it's not where I would want them to go for vacation, they think that I have a negative view of them, right? Which means that they feel that I'm judging them, or they're nervous that I'm going to judge them. So they immediately need to say something to make themselves look better in my eyes. They're seeing things from the way they think I see them, right? So they feel that need to tell them, oh, Rabbi, I really don't like it. Like, so there's someone in ball and chains. You can say you like it. I'm sure you like it. It's great. I'm gonna have a great time there. But they feel that need to say it to me because they're nervous about the way they appear in my eyes, right? And so that's the first thing that I think is going on over there. And the second thing is, and this is sometimes what I say, is like, if you really don't like it, like maybe there are some people who really don't like it, then be true to yourself. Go where you really do like. Why are you doing something just because there's a certain level of pressure that comes to you from the outside? If you're not really happy, if this is not who you are, this is not who you stand for, what you value, then be yourself, right? And I find that it's heartbreaking to know that there's people that are doing so many undesirable things for themselves. Now, look, if they're turning around and saying, but I do it for my children and I'm happy about that, then that's great. Then fine. You're doing it for your children and you value it for your children, then that's great. But if you don't like it and your children don't like it, you're doing it just because there's this expectation, this false expectation on everybody to do a certain thing, then you're not living who you are. You're not being yourself. My heart breaks for such a person. I feel terrible for such a person that they feel like they can't be who they are just because they need to live up to some kind of fictitious standard, right? It's not. It's unfortunate that but we all do this in some kind of way. It's interesting. This woman, Christine Carter, she calls it the high heels paradox, right? So this crowd will hopefully get, right? She says, think about the concept of wearing high heels and how much it doesn't make any sense. Okay, maybe I could find some thing. It doesn't make any sense because we've learned and adopted the idea that we should feel pain in order to please other people, in order to make other people feel like we look good in the eyes of other people, right? It's a crazy thing, and we're okay with that. Now, in the case of high heels, who cares? But imagine that idea now is we're okay feeling emotional pain to make other people feel better. We're sometimes okay, God forbid, enduring physical pain to make other people feel better, right? Why should we ever feel pain in order to make somebody else feel better or to make somebody else look at us in a better way? Why should that ever be the case? Why should we do it that way? It's something that we really have to think about in our own lives because we're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. And it's a level of dishonesty that I think eats away at us. It builds a stress and anxiety and all of these tensions that we're feeling, which sometimes would be lifted off of our shoulders if we could just be ourselves, just be who we truly are. And through that, we're able to grow into our natural selves. I'll close with one Torah idea, and then I'll open up the floor for anybody else. there's an idea mentioned in this week's parasha that Yosef HaTzadik is a paradigm for being above ayin hara, above the evil eye. In the beracha of Yosef, Yaakov tells him, Ben porat Yosef, ben porat ale ayin. You rise above the ayin, the eyes that people could give. What does that mean? Why is Yosef above ayin hara? Right? We often explain ayin hara as jealousy and people looking at you in a negative way. Why is Yosef above ayin hara?
I mean, from what we saw in the past parashiyot, anything that he had was not his. He said it was all from Hashem. So how do you have an ayin hara on Hashem?
Right. So just putting everything in Hashem's hands. Good. Excellent. I'm going to add another layer that Rav Soloveitchik says is a beautiful point. He says he has a little different twist on ayin hara. He says, you know what ayin hara is? It's doing things because to please other people, because other people are looking at you. It's not being truthful to yourself, and it's being manipulated, so to speak, by the ayin, by the eyes of other people. Other people expect something from you. They're looking at you. They want you to be a certain way, and you feel that that negative feeling from other people, and as a result, you change your behaviors, what you say, what you do, what you wear, where you go, who you are, to fit what you think other people expect of you, right? He says that's ayin hara, and he says that takes you out of this world, and he says Yosef was above that. Yosef's character was, he was true to who he was, no matter where he was, whether he was in his family's home, whether he was in the prison of Potiphar, or in his home, or he was the viceroy of Egypt. He always held true to who he was and who his values were, unwavering and uncompromising, regardless of whatever the outside people expected or looked at from him. And that's why he rises above ayin hara. And so sometimes ayin hara is this fictitious thing that we've created, which is really other people expecting something from us, and us feeding that expectation, all the while tormenting ourselves on the inside by not being who we are. And he says Yosef is not that. And if we can model that after Yosef, that's how you become a true tzaddik, because you don't care what other people think, you don't care what other people say. If this is who you are, if this is your value, if this is what you believe in, you do it, and you do it honestly, in a kind way. You don't have to put it in anybody else's face. You don't have to be upset at anybody. You don't have to be militant towards other people, but you live your truth and who you are. And if others follow, great. And if they don't, then you try to help them, and you could be compassionate, and you could be kind, and you could do all of those things. But ultimately, you can look yourself at the mirror at the end of 120 and say, I lived the life that I wanted to live, or the life that God and I, in a relationship, and me and my husband and me and my family knew that we were supposed to live, not the life that everyone else expected me to go ahead and live.
So the way I would understand it though is the opposite, meaning I thought ayin hara, like you reflect, like when your reflex is to pull it back, so you don't get an ayin hara from someone.
What do you mean? Pull what back?
Like in other words, like if someone.
To not be showy.
I guess
Yeah,
so.
that's another element. I'm not
So-
getting rid of. That's the classic way of understanding it. This is more of a.
And they said he was a very handsome man.
Right.
And so he knew, and he never shied away from all his potential.
Correct.
Because, and he was able to achieve it, maybe in that way also he was above the ayin hara. That
Yeah.
he
By the
didn't-
end.
Right,
By the end.
right.
One of the things that the rabbis point out is that certain bumps in the road, maybe Yosef did get a little too egotistical, like when he was in his parents' house and he was telling on his brothers, and he was exposing the dream to them when he knew they were upset, or in the house of Potiphar, he starts to, think a little too much about his looks. So Hashem sends Eshet Potiphar. By the end of the growth, the up and down of Yosef, he realizes not to promote himself and not to flaunt himself, and that's how he shuns away that form of ayin hara, the ayin hara that says, everyone look at me, attracting attention to yourself, for sure. That's the classic form of ayin hara, I agree.
But then also knowing what your potential is
And fulfilling it. Yes, 100%. And so that's why I think Yosef, knowing who he was and living the life that he knew based on his character, not what everyone else around him in these other places wanted him to be or dictated to him, is a way to rise above that type of an ayin hara. It's a different way to look.
I guess it's also an honest assessment of yourself.
Mhm.
You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. So, and each of those help you get to where you're supposed to be.
Correct. Not in an egotistical way. Not in a way that you're,
Honest,
yes.
very
Right, but the problem is how many of us bury some of our talents because maybe they're not so popular in the eyes of other people. Maybe they're new for others, they're looked at a little bit
So that's
differently.
what you'll step in
right?
with that.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to say. So the takeaway I think for us is that we have to be right with who we are. We have to live based on the values, and that doesn't mean you can't grow. It doesn't mean whoever you are now you should stay that way. But as you're developing and as you're open-minded and as you're growing, the person should be living the truth that they believe at that moment that makes sense, not the life that everyone else is expecting from them. And that's how you could look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and be confident. And that's where all of those happiness feelings are going to come in. And then it leads to so many more things as well, in my opinion. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, very good. Enjoy, everyone. Have a great day.